All right, so welcome along, everybody. Thank you for coming this morning to our writing circle on writing your literature review. My name's Kerry, if you haven't met me before, and lovely to have you all along. I think we'll get a few more sort of come in these first 5 minutes or so, but we are going to get started. And just to begin, QT acknowledges the Turrbal and Yagara as the First Nations owners of the lands where QT now stands. We pay respect to their elders, laws, customs, and creation spirits. We recognise these lands have always been places of teaching, research, and learning. And QT acknowledges the important role Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people play within the QT community. So today's resources, I have already put the slides up on Blackboard. I'm going to give you the link. And I'll try and get the video up this afternoon, but if it's not this afternoon, it'll be in the morning, and you will receive an email from me just letting you know the link for the video as well. So I'll go quite quickly, I guess, through the initial slides and information, because you do have the recording and the slides, and we really want to get onto our exemplars on time. And this is a writing circle. So in 2022, we have had workshops, and we'll continue to have workshops this semester, semester 2, where we look at an overview of theory and principles, and we do peer discussions. There are activities in the workshops, of course, and then in the writing circles, even more interactive with exemplars, practical activities, and you check your own writing. Today, we're looking at strategies for writing your clear, well-structured literature review, and we're going to look at 2 of the key aspects of really any writing around your research, but in particular, for sure, in your lit review is critical analysis and synthesis. And something that I talk about all the time is in all of these sessions, we know that you're all at different parts of your candidature. We know that you're from all different fields of study. Some people are doing monograph, thesis by publication, or creative work. So, and also remember at Grad, we're a centralized body. You guys are all in your schools and your faculties. So we make sure that we include everybody in everything that we offer. And so as you're going through, have a think about how things fit for you. If you're up to stage 2, obviously your lit review and any other part or section is going to be a lot smaller than a confirmation or a final thesis. So any kind of proposal, an MPhil proposal as well, is always going to be compressed, isn't it? It's going to be a lot shorter. So the strategies are still the same, but you're going to be writing less in less words. And so, do you have your own literature review handy? Now, just remember as well, when you register for a writing event or any event, you get a reminder email the morning beforehand. And with our writing events, we usually have some kind of instructions or something that you need to do to prepare. For the writing circles that you come to with me, it will usually be bringing your own writing. So make sure you check those UniHub emails out, and your draft is for your own use. So go and grab it out of your computer if you haven't already got it. And we're also examining an exemplar today as well. Okay, so we do have a workshop on literature reviews. It is a really important aspect of your research. So we do have the workshop. It was on a couple of weeks ago. Some of you may have attended it. I'm just putting the link for you for the materials if you want to go back later and have a check of those. I do go over a couple of the things we talk in the workshop, but most of what we talk about today is slightly different. Okay, so we're doing our introduction right now. We're going to look at some basics, and then we're going to look at structuring your lit review and those 2 key strategies, critical analysis and synthesis. And we'll have time after our exemplar to have a Q&A. So you can see here, I really encourage everybody to use the resources on HiQ. I've circled your candidature in red there. That's everything to do with your milestones, your writing your thesis, instructions on presenting it, all of those sort of admin type information. So make sure you go in there and see what's there for you. And training and workshops is highlighted. Engage with industry. That's all about internships and connecting with industry. Plan your career, of course, is all about your careers once you've completed your degrees. And you may not know, but QT ePrints is a really good resource to find exemplar theses. You should jump in there and you can see there, you can choose the format. So choose what you're doing and you can put in some keywords similar to your own and see what you can find. It is a really good way by looking at another thesis and seeing how they've structured and what they've done. Doesn't mean you have to do exactly that, but it'll give you some good ideas. All right, so let's have a look at some basics. So this is the stuff that I'm repeating slightly from the workshop. So the literature review, it's a living document. It's one of the first things you do when you're doing a research project and when you're planning, and then it's continually refined all the way through your research. It's a really important chapter to be seeking feedback on and redrafting many, many times, right up until you're submitting for that milestone. Completely normal to have many, many drafts of a lit review. Now, the other thing to remember is depending on your field of study, your discipline, you may have various different ways of writing a lit review. As I said, what we talk about today are general writing practices that are effective for writing a lit review, but bear in mind if there's anything specific that you need to do for your field of study. Have a think about whether you're doing narrative or systematic. You might not know yet. That's okay if you're at the early stages. Narrative is usually what we find in research proposals, in a thesis, and in journal articles. But in saying that, in many fields of study, you may well, for your thesis, do a systematic literature review. The main difference here is that the systematic one is very strict. There's a protocol that you will put together with criteria as to how you've selected specific literature. If you're going to publish a lit review, you will most likely do a systematic one. But a narrative would be part of a research journal article that was disseminating research findings. So if it was just a literature review that you were publishing, you may need to do a systematic one. Now, I don't really go into systematic writing literature reviews because the OSC, Office of Scholarly Communication, do a really great introduction to systematic reviews. Now, they had a workshop on September 20, but they record them just like we do. So you can see that link there. I would really encourage, if you're going to or thinking of doing a systematic review, go and view that, that workshop. That would be really, really helpful for you. Now, this is a tool that you may have come across or may not. It's actually quite good, which is why I'm telling you. I'm just putting the link in the chat. So you can see there it's called Connected Papers Tool. Basically, you put in your topic, you choose an article, and then it tells you a whole lot of other articles that are related to that one. So if you start with a seminal article from your field, it'll give you a whole lot of other really useful articles. You can see there with those, what are they called? They're not really called, they're nodes. That's what they're called. So they're arranged according to similarity. So the node size tells you how many citations that article has had, and the color tells you the publishing year. So the deeper the color, the more recent it is. And see the lines joining them, the strong connecting lines. You can tell that they're quite similar, the papers, looking at a similar topic. And another one, Open Knowledge Maps. Another visual mapping tool. Again, really useful if you're searching or you want to find some papers that are very similar to what you have already got to just see the differences and similarities. So that one's a useful one too. And as always, we need to keep in our mind that when you're writing, it's always about the reader. So that's one of the reasons why we use exemplars, is because I want you guys to get really good at being the reader yourselves, and not just reading for content, but reading to know writing styles, writing practices and strategies. And so if we think about your documents, who is the reader? So if you want to pop in the chat who you think the reader is, do you think about the reader as being the examiners? Potentially not if you're at the early stages. Maybe you're always thinking that the reader is your supervisor, and that's fine. You don't have to think of it as being anyone in particular, really. They're just the reader. But if we do think about the important reader ultimately, which is your examiners, they will most likely be an expert in your field, but they're not an expert in your study. So you're demonstrating your deep knowledge of the research topic and all of the issues around that. And they're going to be interested because they are in your field of study, but you have to maintain that interest. You have to engage them. You have to persuade the reader that the research is significant and valuable. And you need to make yourself very, very clear at all times. The reader should never have to guess what you're saying. It should be right there for them to understand from what you've written. So always think about the reader. Doesn't matter what stage you're up to as well. You know, if you're writing a research proposal, same deal. You need to persuade the reader that the research is significant and valuable and should be going ahead. So thinking about your examiners, the thing with your lit review is that if it is weak, it really does reflect negatively on the rest of your study. What happens is the examiner will be reading the lit review, and if they feel like it's not critical enough or it's not logical, they're going to start to think, okay, so how did you go with your actual research and implementing your research design? So they'll start to question. We do not want that at all. We want them reading your literature review and saying, right, this demonstrates a comprehensive understanding of the literature. There's critical engagement, there's evidence-based judgments. And if the literature review is really well written, they'll be feeling good and thinking, oh, I can't wait now to keep on reading the rest of these chapters. So one of the things that we should be thinking about with any document that you're writing, or any chapter or any section, what's the purpose? What are you aiming to do here? And with your lit review, you're aiming to demonstrate and show evidence that there is a research problem that needs to be solved and that there's research gaps. Might be one gap, might be more than one gap, it doesn't really matter, but definitely a gap in current knowledge. There's things we do know, there's things that we don't know, and your study is going to contribute insights that will be original and valuable towards contributing to improve the research problem and fill the research gaps. So the value of your research can't all be about the research gap. There also, of course, has to be a problem as well. So that's the main purpose of the literature review, to demonstrate there's gaps and that there's a problem. And you need to demonstrate your depth of knowledge. You need to give the evidence, of course, from the literature. You begin to justify your research design in the lit review as well. And we need to critically analyze previous studies, of course, because if you can analyze previous studies, as I said, with the examiner, if your lit review is good and you can do that, they will say, okay, this person can also do well at analyzing their own data. So it really sets up your study as far as the examiner is thinking. So remember, if you have done your confirmation or even your final seminar, or if you've done any kind of presentation, you'll know that you do get asked questions about what you're doing and about your research. And sometimes those questions are around, why did you do this and not something else? Why didn't you review these research areas? Why did you focus on these? Why are you using that research design? Why are you using that theory and not another theory? So your lit review is where you really are justifying all of those decisions, okay? So it's really important that you start to put together those evidence-based judgments and justifying this is why these things are important. This is why this was appropriate for this study. You don't necessarily in the lit review say, well, I didn't use theory B because of these reasons, but you really need to underpin and justify why you used the theory that you did use. So with all of your documents, including the lit review, if you're really clear about the purposes of the document or the chapter or the section, then it helps you, of course, to fulfill those purposes as well. And again, what does that do? It demonstrates your critical thinking and your ability to do this research project. So this is something that we looked at in the workshop. So if you were at the workshop, you will remember this. Now, I'm actually right now going to upload. All right, so open up the activity sheet. You can see my little spiel about why exemplars are important. We'll recap that in a minute. But you can see there, activity 1. Purposes of your literature review, and that table is in the activity sheet. So what I want you to do, slightly different to what we did in the workshop, this time as you're looking at those purposes, have a look which ones, so think about where you are right now. Are you at stage 2, confirmation, MPhil research proposal? Are you final seminar? Think about where you are right now and which of these purposes are high priority for where you're at now. This is going to be probably of less high priorities if you're at those proposal stages because you don't have as many words. So have a think about what you think are high priority for you in this lit review. What's low priority? So potentially not put in at all or discussed very, very briefly, 1 or 2 sentences. Look at your draft, do that save as, because then you'll still have your original draft there, and just have a look. And anything that you've said from that table that are high priority, are they in your lit review? And not only are they in there, have you mentioned them quite early on in the literature review? It's really important that you mention everything you need to do early on, and then you can give the further details later. We'll look at an example of this in a little while. But certainly if you think something is high priority in your lit review and you leave it till 10 pages in, that's not really a good idea, is it? So I'm going to give you, I've said 10 minutes. I think we can do that. All right, let's have a look at writing a clear, well-structured literature review. So now the idea of the writing process being complex, that's not to worry you. It's to help you to know that it's okay that this is hard and it is challenging. Iterative, meaning we're having to go backwards and forwards. We keep revising, revising, and revising again. So realistically, things always start with reading, doesn't it? Reading is the key to everything. It's how we gain knowledge. It's how we improve our writing as well. So of course, we're reading critically to then be able to think critically, discuss critically, and of course, write critically as well. So all of these steps here that we have, they are intertwined, they're iterative. And then the end result is that what we are after is that really well-structured, clear, evidence-based document. It is a long process and will take time to get right, but that's okay. That's the whole point of the feedback, you know, and the fact that it's iterative. You can see there is a descriptive element to our writing, of course, as well. We have to give background information. We have to give definitions. We have to describe what the studies that we're going to analyze, but then we need to go deeper. So we'll have a look at that in a minute. And also that one in blue there, critical discussion, please don't underestimate the importance of that. Yes, you're going to have those critical discussions with your supervisor. Now I'm talking verbally, not just in writing, of course, like with track changes. You need to have those discussions with your supervisors, of course. And also, if you can find any of your peers, they don't have to be doing the same topic as such, but give each other opportunities to talk about what you're doing so that the other person can make suggestions. And even if those suggestions aren't going to work, it still helps you to think those everything through. So critical discussion is a really important part of your research. And as I said, seeking feedback is really one of the most important things for all parts of your document, but your lit review in particular, because it is a challenging section or chapter to write. So it is essential. It does help you to get into the reader's shoes because you're getting feedback from the reader, and it improves the readability of your document. Try to be active in the feedback process. Ask specific questions of your supervisors or anybody else who's giving you feedback. I'd like feedback on something specific. Tell them, is it about the structure of paragraphs? Is it about the structure of a section that you're looking at? Is it if a definition is clear, or if you know, your judgments are clear? So whatever it is, ask them specific questions, and then you can get better feedback. Reduce the emotions. Sometimes we get feedback we're not expecting. That's okay. Breathe. Give it a day, come back again and respond. Always remember as well that when you're given feedback on your writing, it's about your writing, it's not about you. Okay, so try to reduce those emotions if you can. I've just got a little activity there right in the chat. So who can you seek feedback from other than your supervisor? Does anybody been doing that, seeking feedback from anybody else? You can pop it in the chat. And also too, you know, as part of that seeking feedback, make it clear to the person who's giving you feedback, this is my first draft. I think it's not going to be great, but what can you see in there that's on the right track so far? All right. So be honest and have those discussions before, when you're first seeking feedback, and then of course, once you receive the feedback. Anybody been seeking feedback from anyone other than their supervisor as yet? Doesn't look like it. So feedback literacy is a really important strategy for all of your writing. Actively seek it, appreciate it. It helps with your evaluative judgment. So your ability to judge whether your own work is good or bad, you'll get better at that the more feedback you ask for. And of course, as I said, manage your emotions. And of course, you got to act on the feedback as well. Whether that doesn't necessarily mean just saying accept for track changes. Acting on it could also be asking another question of the person giving you feedback, you know, or making, of course, the revisions that they've potentially suggested. So these will all improve over time. Now, if you are after feedback, we do have facilitated peer feedback sessions. Now, these go really well when I have people that are coming to these sessions and are receiving feedback from their peers. Everything's very positive. People come back and they've received some constructive feedback that they can take actions to improve. So you can see there, there's one on Thursday. And then we've probably got about 4 more left for the end of the year. I've popped the registration link in the chat. Please come along. It's not scary. Everybody is very supportive and helpful. And as I said, you will certainly get some focused and actionable feedback. So please come along. And we will be doing them again in 2023. And exactly right. Thanks, Legion. When you give feedback to others, it helps you to improve your own writing as well. So basically win-win all round. All right, so organizing your lit review, what do you think about these? Have you already realized that you're using one of these structures? So we've got chronological, thematic, based around methodologies. Maybe you're basing your lit review around your conceptual or theoretical framework. Maybe you're using a combination. Does anyone have an idea of what they're already doing? It depends on your needs, depends on your field of study and how it's progressed over time. If you have a field of study that has a long history of research, chronological might make sense. If your research design is similar to most of the studies that are already out there, potentially around methodology might work. If you have a lot of concepts or your theories, then maybe you're doing it thematically. Yep, thanks, David. Thematic. Yep. And different sections may bring in some other ways to organize your literature review, but certainly it is something to think about. It makes it a little bit more structured if you have a clear idea of how the overall structure is going to look. So linked to this is keeping the big picture in mind. What happens sometimes is when we're writing, we get really into each paragraph and we forget to stand back and look at how all those paragraphs link and flow. So really make sure that you look at that big picture, and also remember that whole document, no matter whether it's the proposal or the final thesis, you're telling a story. All right, so your introduction section or your chapter is the beginning of the story. Hey, there's a research problem. There's these research aims that I have to help to gain insight into this research problem and possible solutions. You should, in your introduction, be at least introducing the research design and most definitely beginning that justification about the value of the research. This research is important because it's going to do something for someone, somewhere, your stakeholders. Okay, that needs to be really clear in the introduction. Then the reader knows this is just the overview, and they'll be expecting in your lit review all of the details where you expand everything that you raised in the introduction. And as I said before, remember that your research design, the beginning of the justification for that is in the lit review. Now, all your chapters connect in some way with your final thesis. Yes, each chapter will need to stand alone as such, but it's also part of the whole document. Again, we're looking at big picture, aren't we? And some of your chapters are mirrors and must connect. As we just said, introduction and lit review connect because you're starting the story and then you're giving all the details and evidence in the lit review. Lit review and methods connect because of that justification of the research design. And ultimately your lit review and discussion, those two are mirrors, okay? Because the lit review is explaining the gaps in the previous studies, and the discussion is where you expand on that and your research gets placed into the scholarly literature. So whatever's in your lit review should be mentioned in your discussion to some extent, which is why your lit review is a living document. Once you've done your research and analyzed your data, you may well have to go back to your lit review and add a few things. So, or take out a few things depending on what you found. And that's okay. It's completely normal. And it's why it's a living document. So when you're writing your discussion, you may find that structuring it similar to the lit review will work really well. Okay, because they should be mirrors and looking very similar and having a lot of the same themes and concepts all the way through, with your data and findings the bonus, obviously, for the discussion. All right, so we keep talking about the reader. They're really important. Whether you are writing a chapter at the moment for your lit review or a section, you need to have a first paragraph or at least a couple of sentences to introduce the reader into what is going to happen. Yes, remember you've got your introduction section or chapter, but it's a new chapter now or new section. We remind the reader, hey, there's this research problem. This is my research aims. Here's some key concepts that I'm going to talk about in this lit review, and be very clear about the value of the research very early on. Gets the reader engaged and on board, and you're starting that persuading. Also a good idea to outline the structure of the lit review. Now, if you're in stage 2 or you're doing a research proposal for your MPhil, maybe you don't have to do that because it's going to take up too many words, but maybe just a sentence. The following lit review will analyze blah, 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 or at least just give the reader an idea of what they can expect. If you're writing your lit review chapter, this introductory part could be 1 paragraph, might be 2, might be 3, it just depends. Okay, but definitely something to introduce. Then at the end of the lit review, I really recommend that you put a summary of your main points. Again, it's not repeating, it's reiterating, restating, and making sure the reader is very, very clear about exactly where you're going. Okay, so it'll be the main points, the value of the study. We already know these great things, but we need to know more because of these gaps and because we still have this problem. And then you're also going to set up and say that this study is going to help gain those insights. So really important to keep the reader in mind and in the loop. So we're leading the reader through. Now, remember, I keep saying about that big picture. When you step back and look at your big picture of your lit review, think about those sections and the paragraphs. Are you scaffolding the reader? Which is why the introduction and that first few paragraphs or sentences of the lit review are really important, because it lets the reader know, okay, there's all these concepts that are going to be discussed, so they know what's going to happen, because you can't talk about everything at once, obviously. So you need to figure out the logical order of everything you're going to discuss. What comes first might be really hard to decide. And also, you want to make the reader understand that sometimes, even though you've got an order of the concepts that you're talking about, none is more important than the other. So it's those sorts of things that you need to be really explicit about and say, hey, I've got 5 important concepts. There's no hierarchy, but I need to talk about them one at a time, which I'm going to do. Then I'm going to talk and let you know how they all link and overlap potentially. So it's always keeping the leader in the loop and leading them through, scaffolding them. Don't sort of talk about a finer detail before you've given the broader overview of something. Otherwise, it's confusing because the reader's thinking, okay, there's all these details about this one particular study, but I still don't actually know the lay of the whole body of literature, so to speak. So you're going broad to narrow and stepping the reader through. So this is why subheadings are really important. They really shed light on the topic. And one of the things about a lit review is I can't give you a list of subheadings because they're all going to depend on your field of study and your topic. You'll find if you go into QTE prints, remember I talked about that before, and you look at someone's thesis, the subheadings in maybe the introduction and their methodology will be quite similar to what you have potentially. Whereas the lit review, they'll all be very different, won't they? So seek feedback on the flow of the subheadings and whether they're clear. Seek feedback on that logical structure and flow. And as I said, should be shedding light and give visual clues as to what you're doing in this study. There's an example. So this is our exemplar 2. This is what I want you to notice here. Well, you can tell me in the chat what you notice. Realistically, the subheadings for your lit review should really mirror your title. Okay, so notice there, academic literacy experiences. So the first thing is the nature of academic literacy. So there's a section defining the research topic, basically. And then experiences, we come down and we've got learning environments, first year. So there's something about first year transition. So when you're looking at your table of contents, have a think about those subheadings. Are they telling a story of where this research is going? And do you have the concepts in your title listed somewhere in your table of contents? So this is an activity now for you. I'm just going to give you 5 minutes for this one. So looking at your table of contents, or if you don't have one, you can make a little mini one by copying and pasting, or just leave some notes next to each one. Do you think they tell a story of your topic? Do you think you're scaffolding the reader? Are you giving the big concepts first and then coming down and giving the concepts that come under those big themes? Are they clear or are they vague? Shouldn't really have a subheading anywhere that says introduction, okay? Unless it's a document, a proposal document, and your subheading is introduction, of course, and you have a chapter introduction. But your lit review, you don't need to have a subheading of introduction. Go straight into those initial setting up paragraphs, then you've got your first subheading after that. Also check under your subheadings if that first sentence relates to the subheading or have you gone off topic accidentally. All right, I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. We're not too far from our exemplar. Okay, so while you keep doing that, let's just jump to the next slide because I'm going to go out of the slides now because we're going to go into the exemplar and look at activity 3A, which is looking at exemplar 1. And yeah, just remembering with these exemplars, the aim is that you're going to engage with the text, make judgments about the quality of the writing and apply what you've learned to your own writing. All right, so I'm just going to go out of the slides. You can keep going with your subheadings if that's what you're up to still. Okie dokie. Let's go in and have a look at the first paragraph of a literature review. Remember, I was saying how this is a really important way to orientate the reader. So you've got your activity sheet there. We're just going to have a read through and we've got these questions. Let's have a look. Is the research problem stated? Is the research aim stated? Is there information about what is included in the literature review? So they were the things that I said were really important to have in that first paragraph of a lit review and realistically in the first paragraph of any chapter. So this is a final thesis. It's actually for a master's. It's a master's dissertation, which means it's a little bit shorter than a final thesis for a PhD, but still all the same principles are applying, of course. All right, let's have a look. So you guys are looking for research problem, research aim. This chapter critically reviews the literature regarding one-to-one academic writing support in the Australian tertiary education context. Knowledge of the concepts and issues raised in previous studies provides a background of understanding for this study. Academic writing proficiency is a fundamental element of university education because written assignments and exams are commonly used to assess learning outcomes. However, researchers have argued that first-year international undergraduate students are rarely given sufficient guidance within tertiary curricula to improve their writing skills. To address this issue, many universities offer individual writing support. While research into ESL writing pedagogy has been a major focus in second language studies for many years, there has been less research into the role and nature of one-to-one writing support in the university context. This qualitative research study aims to address this gap by investigating the teaching strategies used by experienced language teachers in one-to-one academic writing consultations. The literature review focuses on 5 key areas: broad overview, blah, blah. Next, the current body of knowledge regarding the nature of individual academic writing consultations is discussed, followed by a detailed review to determine current gaps in the research and to provide a framework from which the research questions can be formulated. Okay. Research problem, what do you think? Is there a sentence you want to pop in the chat? What do you think? No research problem that you can see? What about that? So, So this is the research topic. So see how we're going from broad to narrow. This chapter critically reviews the literature regarding one-to-one academic writing support. So quite broad, right? Then by looking at previous studies, we can get a background of why this study is needed. Why writing? Well, it's important. So setting the scene about why we might care, why it could be valuable. So this potentially could be about value, pretty broad still, but starting to plant the seed. So they're not given sufficient guidance, right? So this has been a solution. However, less research here. So there's two things. There's a problem and there's also a gap. So this, make sure you have a problem as well as a gap. There's a little bit there, this qualitative research study that gives us a little insight that it's qualitative, and this gap. Yeah, so there's a research gap, research aim, sorry. So research problem, yes, still not all that explicit, but it's planted the seed, right? This is just the first paragraph, and this is where your balance is going to come in. You don't need to say everything about everything in that first section or that first few paragraphs, okay? You're planting the seed and getting them to think and go, oh, yes, I see. Then you're expanding later. And then, of course, yes, we've got information about what's included in the literature review. All right, so now you're going to check your draft. Do you have a clear first paragraph to set up your literature review? I want you to have a look at that. Have you got planted seeds about the problem and the aim? Is there a sentence there? The aim of this research is, doesn't have to be the first sentence, but it should be in there. Now, if you're in stage 2 or proposal for an MPhil, probably won't be a paragraph to introduce. Maybe it will be, but at the very least, a couple of sentences. You may not even have time, word-wise, I mean, to have look at that. Look, you know, there's quite a few words there, isn't there? You might not be able to do that if you're at the proposal stage, and that's okay. That's okay. But you certainly need the problem and the aim. All right, so while you guys do that, checking your own draft, I'm going to go back into the slides. All right, so let's look at our key research writing strategies, which are critical analysis and synthesis. And just as a little lead in, of course, critical reading, as I said, really is the basis and foundation for being a good writer. Okay, so start to notice when you're reading, not just the content, but also the writing practices that are being used in your field of study. Always read with an open mind, of course. Think about the purposes and assumptions that the writer has. Are they explicit in what they've written? If not, is there an underlying purpose in there that you can perceive? Think about their statements and arguments, making sure that these people are not biased as well, thinking about your sources as always. How does the text add to your understanding of the key concepts? And try, when you're doing a little bit of a summary or annotating for your own understanding, try to use your own words. And if you annotate while you read, that helps to clarify your thinking. Assistant Professor Mays has some really good videos. I've just popped that into the chat there if you're interested. Yeah, some really good tips in those videos about critical reading. So you're informing and persuading your reader. How do you do this? Through synthesis and critical analysis. You want your reader to achieve a deep understanding of what we know and why we need more, and you are demonstrating your deep understanding and your expertise in the field. As we said before, a little bit of descriptive writing, of course, but critical writing needs to be in there as well to transform that information into persuasion and evidence-based arguments. If you just describe previous studies, it's words on a page, okay? It's a laundry list. We don't want that. We need that critical analysis, and we need that synthesis in there as well. So you're synthesizing a body of knowledge, okay? You're not just taking 5 or 6 or 10 studies and saying, oh, someone did this, someone did something else. Before that, you need to establish what is the current body of knowledge? What do we know? You're making judgments about this body of knowledge, and you're saying, where does your research fit into that scholarly conversation? And then you're going to pull out specific studies and go deeper into those. But before you do that, you need to make judgments about the current body of knowledge and then link it back to your study and where your study fits. And with that big picture of the literature, are there patterns? Are there strengths and weaknesses? Are there debates? Are there controversies? And think about whether you need to put those in or not. And if you are, where do you sit with those controversies? Okay, here's an example. So this is from the example we're about to look at, not the one we just looked at then, but the next one we're looking at, which is a final thesis. Remember, we looked at the table of contents, and 2.1 was the nature of academic literacy. So this is that first paragraph of the first section. There's been information before to set the reader up. Then this is section 2.1. Having a look at this, do you notice any judgments? Do you notice links back to the study? Do you notice any synthesis? You can pop into the chat if you notice anything. To examine the various issues surrounding how universities address academic literacy, it's important to have a clear understanding of what the term means and why it may be necessary for universities to improve current pedagogical approaches. Okay, there's our topic, right? Understanding what universities do. Firstly, academic literacy is a reasonably new field of inquiry, which has been informed through literacy research, right? So setting the scene. Traditional interpretation is it involves a set of basic autonomous reading and writing skills. But this traditional view, also called the autonomous or deficit approach, has been challenged because it's considered outdated and narrow and fails to recognize literacy as highly influenced by social and cultural context. Does this seem like a problem? Could be. Researchers have questioned the underlying assumption that literacy is purely a technical skill and have put forward key arguments as to why literacy instruction is incongruous with today's tertiary context. Therefore, studies investigating the academic literacy experience of tertiary students from a range of sociocultural backgrounds can provide insight. Okay, so setting the scene, obviously the next paragraphs are going to go in and pull all of those concepts and problems and issues apart. But what do you see so far in the writing? Let's have a look. So there's judgments. How are the judgments being shown? With strong vocab, right? It is important. Why it may be necessary. Still a little bit of hedging, but we've got the word necessary. Linking back to the study, improving current pedagogical approaches to literacy and learning. That's what the study's investigating. There's comments on the body of knowledge. And you can see more about making judgments, has been challenged, outdated and narrow, fails to recognize. So see that strong vocab, that's what you're aiming for. That strong vocab, that is putting your critical analysis into the document. And then that last sentence brings back, okay, therefore we need to investigate these things. I wonder who's going to do that. This researcher, okay. When you're analyzing previous studies, when you get into those important studies, you need to talk about the methods and make comments on the methods, even if it's to say, oh, everybody uses similar methods, but this study used something different. Was it good? Was it bad? Talking about limitations as well. All right, because you're starting to justify your research design. Here's an example. See if you notice judgment, strong vocab, extra details about a seminal study, maybe. The main finding. So this one is, sorry. Yep, this is from exemplar 2 as well. The main finding revealed in the thematic data analysis, so there's a comment there, so we know what they did, is mirrored Mirroredly in street study, Crosby's participants perceived, course teachers assumed they were already familiar. They reported difficulties understanding discipline-specific lexicon, keeping up with a large volume of assigned readings, suggested the curriculum developers and teaching staff lacked understanding of student needs. This negatively influences their ability. There was solutions put forward and there was conclusions. So what do you think? Are there judgments? Is there strong vocab? Is there synthesis in there? Yep. Righto. Thematic data analysis, is it an extra important detail? There's some findings in there. There's some synthesis in there as well. Essentials, not synthesis. I don't know what that's in green, sorry. And just really notice the vocabulary. They lacked understanding, negatively influence. There's an absence of explicit literacy instruction. And then there's a judgment at the end, isn't it? So this is the researchers or the author's voice. This is not, so make sure as well that you don't, in your paragraphs, don't have citation after citation after citation. Your analysis needs to be in your voice, that you're allowed to make those judgments. So you make the judgment, you show the evidence, and then you wrap up the judgment. All right, so critical analysis, we're making sure we're not just being descriptive. Ask these questions, identify the gaps, and always bring back to your research problem and research aims. How do we demonstrate critical analysis? With that strong vocabulary, by stating the value and significance of your study and saying there's a clear research problem, by evaluating and justifying previous studies and their paradigms and research strategies, and having that chain of logical reasoning as well. So that really nice structure to lead the reader through. So think about, ask yourself when you're reading and when you're writing and when you're proofreading your writing, am I being descriptive or critical? So surface learning, when you're just describing and summarizing, okay? Deep learning is when you're questioning and you're stating implications and making an informed stance. Descriptive is saying, oh, someone did this study. The critical comes in when you say, well, what are the consequences? Well, there was these conclusions that means something. Descriptive is saying, okay, we can do one thing or the other thing. The critical comes in where you say, well, there's two options. We should go with this option because of these reasons. So it's always extending past the description is what you're after. So when we're writing critically, so synthesizing and critical analysis actually overlap, right? Part of being critical is being able to synthesize multiple sources, being able to analyze data and literature as a whole, and linking the concepts to present evidence that's going to lead to that new knowledge that you're going to find. And as we said before, if you can write a good lit review where there's a balanced and critical analysis of these previous studies that leads to the problem and the gaps that you're going to address, that's a well-written lit review that your examiners will think, great, can't wait to read more. Vocabulary, really important. Just by putting in that strong word in there, it makes such a difference, doesn't it? You can see, okay, effective, vast, negatively significant. There's hundreds of words out there that you can use to be strong. Reporting verbs are another way you show your critical analysis. Okay, this is actually a really good resource. I'm popping it into the chat. Okay, so weaker position, neutral, and strong position. You're using those to show your critical analysis, all right? So if you think a previous study hasn't really done enough, you can say, you can use more a neutral. So claims, believes, expresses. If you think a seminal study has done something really great, you're going to take those stronger reporting verbs. Transition signals are always important, of course. Additionally, however, therefore, despite this, all of those, whereas, while, you need those in there as well. So here's a little example. No transition signals, no strong vocab. This study adds to current higher education research by investigating first-year undergraduate economic socialization and literacies. Understanding these issues is necessary. For EAL students, transition into a new learning environment means they need to understand, develop and engage in unfamiliar literacy practices. Insights can inform ways to improve pedagogical decisions. All right, so no words on a page. Okay, the words are okay and we can get them, but if we're the reader, we're sort of like, okay, nice. Just by adding these words, the aim of this study, it's then explicit and clear. The reader has no doubt, right? Increased understanding, not just understanding. If we can increase the understanding, because we already have some understanding, right? Importantly, okay, that's highlighting to the reader, hey, this is important for this study. And then you've got your therefore, which is a really simple one, but works so well. You're wrapping it up and you're doing the work for the reader. Okay, because of these things, we need this extra insight. Okay, so just by adding a couple of words to a paragraph, it really improves it and gives the critical analysis that the reader is looking for and tells the reader what they need to know without them having to guess. Last little tip is the Manchester Phrase Bank. If you haven't had a look at it, I really think you should. It's very good if you're a little bit stuck with words. All right, excellent. We're a little bit behind, not too bad though. Let's examine our exemplar. All right, now you have your exemplar there. I've uploaded it. I know someone just came a little bit late. Just let me upload it again. Okay, so we've got everyone back from the breakouts. We've just got a few final tips and then we're going to get into our Q&A. Really important to proofread before you seek feedback. My best advice for that is to print if you can and read aloud. Research does show that we are able to pick up a lot more if we're reading on paper as opposed to on the screen. Our eyes skip across on the screen, and also reading aloud means you can hear when there's something not quite right. So much more likely to notice if there's something that you need to fix. As we keep saying, seek feedback often to develop your feedback literacy and improve the readability of your document. Notice when you read, and we do have a lot of resources on Blackboard. I think, yep. So if you haven't been on Blackboard at all as yet, please pop in there because it's not just writing resources. There's a whole stack of stuff there that you'll find useful. If you need help with anything, reach out to your supervisors, reach out to Grad, reach out to your faculty librarians. They're very, very helpful as well. You should know your faculty librarian, do a search if you're not sure. But yes, there's plenty of support throughout QUT to help you if you need it. So please, please reach out. Wanting to know more, this is actually a really good article. Doesn't matter what your field is. I'm just going to pop that link into the chat as well. Yeah, it is good. I recommend that you check that one out. So takeaways for today, your literature review is a living document. You're going to be working at it from the very start to the very end. Keep track of those purposes and what you're trying to achieve and demonstrate. Make sure you're explicit and clear about the research problem in those initial chapters, very important. And remember, you're demonstrating your deep understanding of your field of study and where your research fits in the scholarly conversation, and you are informing and persuading the reader of the value of your study. You're going to gain insight into this problem to help towards solving that problem. I would love to hear your feedback. You can use that QR code there in the slide, or I'm putting a link into the chat. It's anonymous, only take you a minute. Remember, 5 is strongly agree, 1 is strongly disagree. And I do take on board the feedback, of course. So thank you in advance for completing that. So we're right in the middle of semester 2, and next Tuesday, the 4th, we've got another writing circle on research proposal writing strategies. There's a HDR careers Q&A. They're always very informative. That's on the 5th. And 11th of October, HDR Writers Wellbeing Lounge, where you go and you do writing sprints. Good to get some draft writing done. You catch up with your peers as well. As you know, everything's on high queue, and you do get that HDR Matters email to your inbox every Monday morning. So that's good to know what's coming up for the week. And now, please write in the chat, pop on your mic if you'd like to, if you have any questions or anything you want to say. Love to hear from you. You don't need to be shy. Happy for you to pop on your mic. Also, if you prefer, in the chat. If you need to go, completely understand that as well. Thanks for coming along. Thank you for going into the breakouts and engaging with the exemplar. Really, really very good way to learn. So yes. Okay. So it looks like most of you are going, which is perfectly fine. Yes, a lot to take in. The lit review is big. But if you are at that proposal stage, obviously a bit smaller, but again, those decisions, what to keep in, what to leave out, never delete, because if you do need to take words out, they'll at least be there for when you go to the next milestone document. Excellent. Just a question in the chat, advice regarding reading. That's a pretty big question. So what I would advise is read with purpose. Okay, so if you found, say you've got 10 journal articles and you think, okay, I want to sit down and read them and see what information I can use for my lit review or whatever it might be, read with purpose. So what is it? Are you sort of looking for everything because you're at the beginning? Are you looking for something specific? Ask yourself questions as you're reading. Are these things that you've noticed in other articles? Are these things that are new? Are these things that you already know? And work out a way to keep track. So whether that's a spreadsheet, maybe you'll use EndNote to keep track, because in EndNote, you can write a little spiel to say, okay, this is what was important in this particular article. If you're reading textbooks, maybe that's to find out some theory or to find out how to undertake your research design. That may well be. So again, thinking about what did you learn? What did you already know? What was contentious? What do you think about the findings? Were these findings useful to the field of study? What are the limitations to this study? Are you going to potentially address some of those limitations? So a whole lot of questions as you're reading. So you're reading actively and critically, not really passively. Really good way to extend your vocabulary as well. Whether you're a native speaker, non-native speaker, you want to know the vocabulary used in your field of study. So reading is how we widen our vocabulary as well. And I would also, time gets away. So give yourself time limits as well and say, right, I'm going to spend 20 minutes or whatever it might be on each article. And also you don't have to read deeply in every single thing that you find. It'll be the ones that are most related and most useful. So you may need to do a bit of a pre-skim through to figure out, okay, this might be all right, but it's actually not important right now. I need to look at the more important articles. I really advise that you check out the critical reading videos. I did put the link in. I can pop it in the chat again. These are very good videos. They're very short. They only take a couple of minutes each one. Anything else about reading? Does anyone want to jump in? Okay, still got a couple of you here. Is that enough about reading? Certainly reading and writing are completely intertwined. Okay, so the better you are at reading and noticing, the better your writing will be, of course. Yep, my email. If you have any questions about the exemplar, feel free to email me as well. As I said, though, you know, your perceptions as the reader are right. Okay, so there's no sort of right or wrong. I'm not going to tell you something and then you go, oh, I was completely wrong. You know, your perceptions are what you feel as the reader. Do you feel engaged? Are you persuaded? That's what you sort of should be looking at when you're reading those exemplars. And what is it that engages you? What is it that's persuading you? What is it about the writing? And you can think about that with research articles too. Look at the structure, look at the language they use and the structure they use. How does it make you feel as the reader? Are you reading saying, yes, I see, or are you reading going, oh, I'm a bit lost here? Because it can happen. Just because something's published doesn't mean that it's brilliantly written. It should be well written, of course, but again, you know, you will find articles that are easier to read than others. So see if you can work out what it is exactly about the one that you found good to read. What was it that led you through and engaged you? And it will most likely be those explicit and clear sentences, those reporting verbs, those transition signals, and those orientating sentences that let the reader know what's happening, and going from that broad to narrow. Overall, this is the situation, and then here's all the finer details underneath. All right, well, I think we're just about done. I don't think there's any other questions. Oh, good, I answered the question about the reading, I think. No, it wasn't about the reading. All right, cool. Feel free to email me, okay? Don't ask me to don't email me, ask me to edit your document, of course. But feel free to email me and to ask questions. Yes, the presentation slides are already up on Blackboard. I'll put the link in for you right now. So when you go into Blackboard here, you'll see the slides and the recording, maybe this afternoon, but certainly first thing in the morning, okay? I'll send you an email with the link for it'll be the same link actually for the video, of course, but yeah, that'll all be in an email. And as I said, yeah, email me anytime with your questions. And I think I will see some of you next week for proposal writing strategies, research proposal writing strategies, and maybe some of you can come to peer feedback on Thursday. I'd love to see you there. It's not scary, I promise. I'm with you. everyone who comes is lovely. So be brave. Come and get some feedback on your writing. It doesn't have to be the lit review, it can be whatever you like. All right. Shall we all go and have some lunch now? I'm just going to say goodbye to the recording. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming today, and I will see you all soon.